Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers. I didn't know that this one was going to happen. Jameis and I contacted each other, but I wasn't quite sure if the instant message I sent him on Facebook got through because we're not Facebook friends, so I didn't know if he actually saw it or not. I saw that he had signed up for the appointment. It was getting a few minutes late. I wrote him an email. I tried to Facebook Messenger him. I wrote him another email, and so I said, I'll wait another 5 or 10 minutes, and then bam, he was right there. So he told me he had mentally made note that it was going to happen today, and then somehow something came up. So that's what happens, That's what life is like. We get interrupted by life. We have some things going on. He's a stranger. I'm a stranger. I thought, okay, it may not happen, but I'm happy he's here. So I know nothing about this man. His name is Jamais Jochim. Did I say that right, Jameis?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so that's good. So you can see, I don't know anything about him because I basically wasn't even sure I said his name right. Jameis, welcome to 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers. How are you today?
Okay, yourself?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. Thank you. Um, because we don't have any idea who you are. I mean, I don't. You might be a rock star in the world that you live in, but I don't have any idea who you are. Who are you? And tell me who you are and what's important to you.
The quickie version is I'm basically a writer. I tend to write a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Best known for podcasting. I do a podcast on writing, basically. And I'm more interested in trying to figure out ways to make it easier for people to communicate with each other.
Wow. And why is that so important to you, James?
Because I'm seeing a lot of stuff that's going wrong in the world is a major when you start looking at where it actually starts coming from, it's because two people basically aren't really trying to communicate with each other, and they're basically basing a lot of their assumptions pretty much off stereotypes and other misinformation.
Yeah.
I think if there's a lot more communication, you're going to see a lot more peace in the world.
Um, I love when two people who don't know each other come together into a room and believe exactly the same thing. So I thank you for sharing that with me. I want to just take a moment and say our conversation today is sponsored by the book over my left shoulder, The Mosaic. The Mosaic is a story almost exactly like what Jameis just said. But it's a story about a boy who loses his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asks the adults where his parents are, they tell him they're in a place called heaven. So he sets out in search of the place called heaven. But the people he meets along the way are not the holy men and the spirit and the rabbis and the priests and the ministers and the swamis and the gurus and the medicine men and women and the aborigines elders. They're the trash man and the blind woman and the homeless guy and the juice man and the waitress and the gardener. And when he asks himself, I wonder why I'm meeting these people. Like, what are they doing here? Why would I meet these people to show me heaven? His answer comes, just sit there and listen to them. Because as you listen to them, maybe you'll understand something. And Jameis, in 100% of the cases, the person he sits and speaks to is 100,000 times different than the person he came up to. Not because they've changed, but because the first impression he had of them changed. And when he realizes that over and over and over and over and over again, he wonders what the world would look like if he didn't see it through his own eyes. He saw it as the world existed on its own. So at that point, he meets a monk who unzips the sky and walks him through to a parallel reality where he meets a wise one who's the keeper of the mosaic. And that's all I'll say about it. In the event that someone gets excited and wants to read it, it's available on Amazon. Thank you for listening to that. That's our sponsor, The Mosaic. Tell me what makes you happy.
Spending time with family, especially if it's just basically just messing around or making fun of something or just having fun.
Are
Sometimes it's just simply sharing a recipe.
Wow, that's nice. So simple things, not anything too complicated.
Not really.
Do you have a family of your own?
No, unfortunately.
Okay. Um, if money weren't important, what would you do?
I'd probably disappear and just go, just simply go out somewhere where I could basically have like internet access, and that'd be pretty much it. I would not mind living in a lighthouse. Let's put it that way.
What is a lighthouse?
A big building that basically spreads light into the ocean,
Oh, okay. So,
keeps ships away from that
wow,
particular area.
wow. What would you do if you lived in a lighthouse?
Probably get bored really quick when I'm thinking about it, but yeah, it's just occasionally you do want to, socialize. And well, when you're a lighthouse, most of the other places are about 3 or 4 hours away.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
can't go to the local comic book shop, for example, and just talk comics.
yeah. So, would you really like to just live in a lighthouse or not?
Strangely enough, I think so. It'd just be sort of fun. It'd be actually useful, and you pretty much do whatever you want there.
Huh. So, what keeps you from living in a lighthouse?
I have no idea, actually. I think it's just like I think part of it is I just like cities too much, which is sort of funny. You have to understand, I grew up on a lot of my childhood was spent on a 44.5 acre ranch.
Wow.
So it's just, you can pretty much go for literally hours in any direction. Well, not, as far as walking goes, and not encounter anybody.
Yeah.
On top of that, we had some really great trees throughout the area, blackberry vines, even an irrigation ditch. If you wanted to swim or anything like that, you could find that somewhere on the ranch.
Wow.
I guess ranch isn't quite the accurate word, but it's 44.5 acres in Northern California.
Wow.
So you've got all the trees, you've got all the hills, and you've got ridiculous amount of blackberry vines.
Wow.
Of course, you've also got poison ivy, but
Well, picking blackberries off blackberry vines is amazing. It's one of the. I have a developmentally delayed daughter, and we used to live up in the Nevada City area, and we had blackberry vines all around where we lived, and we would go for walks and just pick blackberries, and she was like in heaven.
oh
She,
yeah, definitely. Wait till she figures out how to jar all that stuff.
yeah, we never really jarred it. We brought it home and there were so many of them. We just brought them home and just and ate them for a couple of days, and then went out and collected more. And it was on the route from where we lived to the store that we shopped at. And often we would walk that route because it was about 2 miles, and we would just walk together, just up and down the hill to get there. So it was super cool. Um, let's go to a lightning round. I'm not very good at lightning rounds, but let's see what happens. All right.
Okay.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Coffee or tea?
More of a tea person, but I'm not really into the whole thing. So
What do you drink when you have to drink something?
I usually drink soda.
Soda. Wow.
Soda or water.
Okay. What kind of soda? What's your soda of choice?
Right now it's Mountain Dew Light.
Wow. Yahoo.
I need the caffeine. Well, caffeine keeps me focused. Go figure.
Yeah. So you get your caffeine through soda as
Pretty
opposed
much.
to tea or coffee.
Well, you have to understand. I'm diabetic, so whereas the tea is great, the problem is that most of this it's just not. Sorry, let me back up. I'm diabetic and hyperkinetic.
What does hyperkinetic mean?
I Now they're calling it ADHD.
Gotcha.
Basically, it means I have a little bit extra energy, and it gets interesting. I have problems focusing, but when I do focus, I'm laser focused.
Wow. Wow.
So the problem, of course, is getting to that laser focus part.
Yeah.
And the easiest way I've been able to find of doing it is basically by doing a mix of sugar and caffeine. Basically, the caffeine provides all the extra energy, but it ends up actually tiring me out. But I also need the sugar to basically get past those points, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So you basically ride a current of high and low.
Right.
And yeah. So instead of trying to be like mild, sort of
So
straight line. But I understand.
pretty much.
Most of us
And the
do
problem here is that tea basically doesn't have enough caffeine in it to do anything for me. And coffee, well, you've got the problem that in order to basically make it work, you basically have to put in a lot of sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, of course, is where the diabetic part of the condition kicks in.
Yeah. Unless you're like me, I like coffee. I like it black. I like it strong. I don't like milk in it. I don't like sugar. I just like straight up coffee because I
Yeah,
love the taste and the feeling of it.
I never got into the. Go figure. I can, beer I love, vodka I love, real strong tasting stuff. But I've never really been able to get into the coffee.
Yeah, it's no problem. People are different. Would you say in general you're more conservative in the way you think or more liberal in the way you think?
None of the above. I tend to make fun of both camps.
Okay. What? So where does that place you? Does it
I'm what
place
you
you
call I'm pretty much fanatic about being a moderate.
a moderate? Love that. And
I'm basically
what's a moderate mean to you?
I'm basically the guy who comes in and makes fun of both sides.
Why
Occasionally,
why make fun of? Why not bring peace to both sides?
because occasionally, in order to bring peace, you basically have to show somebody that they're wrong.
Huh.
Don't get me wrong. It's you definitely have to build people up and basically agree with them when they're right. But at the same time, one of the ironies is that part of being in the communication is you have to be willing to basically point out that somebody is wrong.
Huh.
And a lot of people are either forget about that or take it take it way too strong.
Yeah.
If you're wrong, then obviously you're an idiot, and because you're an idiot, I don't want to deal with you,
Yeah.
type of thing.
That's what they think.
The problem is, of course, you have to realize that again, when people have to be allowed to be wrong.
Yeah.
If they're not allowed to be wrong, they're not going to back down from their points ever. And when you have somebody who's not backing down from the points, you create a fanatic.
So I have a different thing that I'd like to throw over the net to you because I love the way you think. And I really like. I'm not throwing it over because I want to challenge. I'm not challenge you. I just want to understand it better.
Okay.
I think almost exactly the opposite of the way you think, and that's why I love having conversations. Because I think in this room, one of the things that happens is I hold the space for people to be loved and accepted, listened to and heard, acknowledged and validated. I don't try and say to anybody that they're wrong or they're right. You have every right to believe whatever you want to believe. You have every right to live your life the way you want to live your life. It's not my right to tell you how to live your life or tell you you're right or wrong. I just want to know what you believe. And what I find is in this room, most of the time, we get to peace pretty quickly because people no longer feel like they have to defend themselves and hold their walls up. They feel just loved and accepted, and they let those walls come down, and who they aren't disappears, and who they are suddenly emerges. What do you think about that?
I think you took what I said just a little too strongly.
Okay.
There's two aspects to it. First off, the thing about having a freedom of expression is that means you have to have that. Freedom of expression means that occasionally you have to be able to be caught up on whatever you did wrong. Occasionally you do have to be corrected. But that's what's cool about having a freedom of expression is that you can say pretty much whatever you want as long as you recognize that being respectful to the other person.
Yeah.
And part of that is that what I'm sort of looking at is that when I start looking at a lot of the problems with communication is because some people get too wrapped up into their own way of thinking. Geez. One thing I'm dealing with right now, for example, is a lot of conservatives who are backing Kyle Rittenhouse because they're seeing basically a kid who basically screwed up, did some wrong things, and was basically actually trying to defend his particular neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. I can understand that and appreciate that. But if you're truly about respecting the person, you recognize when they're right, but you also recognize when they're basically occasionally mess up. And the problem is figuring out where the balance lies in there. Because you can't always come down on somebody or they're going to basically, like you point out, they're going to basically go into, I know there's an actual team, it's like bunker philosophy or whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to build up their walls. They're going to basically find all the armor that they possibly can to take you down. And it's going to create a major problem. The catch here is that, so you can basically, it's finding that balance between where the person is right and where the person is wrong, and basically figuring out a way to nudge them along into the correct path.
So who gets the right to say what the correct path is?
Both sides do.
Okay.
If this is truly a freedom of expression situation, then both people should have a right to say whatever they want and to
Okay.
state their case.
Cool.
And the basic part is that every conversation can be looked at either as a debate or an argument or even a negotiation, which is a weird way of looking at, especially the negotiation part.
Yeah, I would like to add one more thing to that way to look at it. Also could be looked at as an innovation. Because what happens when two people who disagree with each other sit down and see and look at the same thing and see a different world, when I allow you to tell me what world it is that you see, and I've never seen it that way, that's a moment of innovation for me. That might show me something that I never saw before when I look at the world that I look at now. And
Right.
that innovation could create, huge change. Could help could make in an even broader sense. That innovation could make something that was not possible to me suddenly possible. Because I believe the only reason something's impossible is we don't see a way to make it possible yet.
Oh,
But
definitely.
if you suddenly show me something that I never saw before, then suddenly the impossible just might become possible by me understanding what it is you're saying.
The problem is you do have to figure out a way to figure out where that common ground is.
You have
And
to
when
be what? What did you say? You have to be what?
the fun part is figuring out where all that common ground is, because once you actually do find that common ground, like you point out, a lot of really great stuff can happen.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the problem is you have people that need to basically figure out that, hey, they need to actually find where that common ground is and go at it from there.
yeah. And do you think that's hard to do?
Depends on the person, but usually not really. Not when people actually are interested in actually holding, figuring out what everybody's trying to actually go on with.
Yeah, because I think on the outside we're somewhat different, but underneath if anybody hurts our kids or hurts our mom, we're all going to feel the same way.
Oh
If
yeah,
right, if anybody is laying on the street and needs help, most of us are going to go and help them. It's just we all have the same basic desires to be loved and accepted, listened to and heard, and acknowledged and validated. And when we get that and can give that, then people turn out to be quite, quite um, the same in terms of what's important to them. I find.
oh, definitely.
I told you I sucked at lightning round, right? So here, let's go on to the next one. Um,
Okay.
would you say you are shy or outgoing?
Depends on the situation. I can basically act really outgoing, but I'm actually more of a shy person.
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely try to avoid conflict as much as possible, even though it's sort of fun when you realize just how much I tend to go right into it. Go figure.
You are a man of a lot of opposite viewpoints. I'm seeing here.
Well,
You, you're a live in the lighthouse, but I love the city. I avoid conflict, but I run right into it.
it's
Why is
just
that?
because I don't know. I think it's basically some idiot basically pointed out that an intelligent person can hold many contradictory thoughts at one point.
I see.
But it's just sometimes I like the city. I love the noise. I love all the socialization. I love all that you can basically watch people and nobody bugs you about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at the same time, you want to get away from everything and just concentrate on what's important to you. And you can't do that if you're distracted by other people.
yeah, yeah,
So that's where that love of the lighthouse comes in. It's basically I can concentrate on what I want to concentrate, and not have to worry about what everybody else thinks.
I love that. Do you feel
Um,
do you feel like you fit into the world, or have you always felt you're a little different?
I glory in my differences. Um, it's just I always felt like I've always been a little bit different, but that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
And occasionally, as I grew up, I found out that you do occasionally need those people who are on the outside looking in.
Tell
You
me
need
what that means.
what you basically need is people with an outside perspective. People who can basically say, hey, this goes back to where I was trying to point out where it's okay to point out people are wrong. Is that occasionally you've got two people that will keep going at each other, straight loggerheads, and it's because neither one of them are, giving any type of ground.
Yeah.
You need somebody to basically come in and say, hey, here's where the common ground lies. Here's where some of the mistakes are, and I think we can work on basically fixing these issues.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because basically, you had somebody who's just there in the situation completely. That person is still going to basically be biased towards one of those two sides.
So, what do you think's lacking in people that they can't do that?
I think it's just people get too caught up into their own thing and forget other people actually have their own perspective on things.
So, can I give you my thought on what's missing?
Sure.
I'd love your opinion on it. I think people have forgotten how to listen. I think we talk way more than we listen. And if we would actually just take a few minutes and listen to each other, and just really listen to each other, we wouldn't stand on the sides of the world and yell at each other. We would literally have to come closer in and listen to each other a little more. And in listening to each other, we would find that we're not all that as different as we think we are.
Definitely. That is, I agree that is a major problem.
Okay,
It's
good.
just, you've got a lot of people that just really are just about, talking, getting their viewpoint across. And until they get that viewpoint across, they're not going to listen to anybody else.
Yeah.
The problem is, of course, occasionally these people, they do need to put a gag on every so often and just shut up and listen.
Um, would you say you are more of a giver or a receiver?
Uh, at this point, I think most people would say I'm more of the receiver. It's just, but that's just because I don't tend to have all the finances and all the other resources a lot of other people have
Yeah.
in my family.
Yeah.
So, and it's not exactly in a situation where I can actually give to a lot of people.
Okay. So you think when you think of giving, you think in giving in terms of financial or presence or things. How about just giving of your heart or giving of your wisdom or giving of your the ear to listen to other people? You can do that without any money.
Well, in that regards, I'm definitely a giver, but it's just sometimes, it's just sometimes you feel like you should be doing a little bit more.
Yeah. How come? How come you feel like you should be doing more than you're doing?
I just, like I said, basically tend to look in, it's really hard not to look in terms of things of giving and taking.
Hmm.
And it's pretty easy to see that when you basically don't have every resource that everybody else does, you're also not listening to as much as other people are. It's really hard not to see you as much more receiving than giving.
Do you feel listened to right now in this conversation?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it may not be as hard as you think. It might just be that some we don't know how to listen anymore. It might not have anything to do with how much resources you have.
Um, but I would point out, I do have a lot of situations where people actually do listen to me on a lot of different topics.
I bet they do, because you have a lot. I bet you have a lot to say.
So I do tend to get tagged in on a lot of interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But part of that again is because I'm the guy who basically does the research, tracks the facts, and tries to figure out basically what's really going on.
Love
And
it.
sometimes I will come up with stuff that nobody's really appreciative of.
Yeah.
But
Do you feel like you speak more, or do you feel like you listen more?
I would like to say a little bit of both. I mean, I probably do speak a lot more than I probably should, but part of that is because but at the same time, I do tend to listen to a lot of what people say. And so it sort of gets interesting after, and you can actually track me in a conversation where you actually can still watch my viewpoint change throughout as the conversation goes on.
And what happens to have your viewpoint change?
Somebody will actually say something that's different that needs to be actually considered, something I wasn't aware of,
Yeah.
just some new interesting detail that does put a new light on the subject.
Cool. Would you say you operate from your head more or your heart more?
Probably more from my head. Even though, of course, there is Sorry, I'm not a really big fan of things being this or that. The best leaders you find are basically people who, even though they tend to listen to their head, also go through their heart.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
If you go totally logical, really bad things happen.
Yeah.
If I have to point out Nazis or what happened in the two red revolutions, which were pretty much 100% more based more on logic than they were actual raw emotion. Well, that's not quite accurate, but they were based pretty much on people basically saying, "Hey, I need to be in charge, and this is how I'm going to do it." And they were basically the way they were phrasing it was that if you listen to me, all these really good things would happen, and they were actually able to back up a lot of what they said, at least initially. And so you also have things like the um, eugenics movement back in the 1930s. If you listen strictly to your head and you just go straight logic, you're always going to miss out the moral aspects of things. On the other hand, if you listen solely to your heart, if you go strictly on emotion, well, we also know just as much bad stuff will happen from that as well, because people will stop trying to logic things out, will actually trying to think things out ahead, and will just simply go with what they think is important at the time.
Hmm.
And
So, are you a person that um, is a black and white person, or do you know what gray looks like?
I'm a very gray person.
Because in asking you the question here, are you a head or your heart person? You immediately went to if I'm 100% in my head or 100% in my heart. That really wasn't my question.
I know.
I want
Like
to
I said,
know
I'm not a really big fan of
of either
this or
or.
that.
Right, I understand. Okay, all right. So I thanks for bearing with me. Um, do you believe people are more similar than they are different, or more different than they are similar?
I think people are a lot more similar than they think.
Yeah.
It's
So
just a matter of figuring out a way to actually figure out how to get that across.
yeah, but it's interesting because I gather data from these conversations that I have with people, and on that point in particular, I was quite surprised to find that huge numbers, like in the 90s, of the people that I've spoken to said, I think people are more similar than they are different. And yet, that really, and it might just be the population that's drawn to these conversations is skewed a little bit, but it certainly doesn't feel like the world we live in where everybody's pointing out how different we are and fighting about the differences.
You
Why do you think that
you
is?
ever play football?
Yeah, I did. I played for school.
Okay. So is it easier to basically look at how the people are? Is it easier to tell who the teams are, or is it easier to tell who the leaders are?
I think if they're wearing different colored shirts, it's easy to tell who the teams are. But
What
I
I'm
think
basically looking at is are you going to basically go for, if you're looking for who the leader is, are you automatically going to go figure out who the captain of the team is, or are you actually going to figure out who the real leader of the team is? You understand what I'm saying?
no, explain it to me.
Sometimes you'll find within a football team, or any kind of team, that the person who's actually there, the big person who's leading, isn't usually the person who's actually deciding what all the decisions are and all that. They're the person who's basically working with one or two other people, a counselor or something like that, in order to figure out what actually is going to happen in a given situation.
So
It's like King Arthur and Merlin.
So bring me back to that being why people who believe they're more similar than to each other point out the differences of other people.
Because it's real easy to figure it's real easy to judge based on differences than it is on similarities.
And why do you think we need to judge?
I never said we need to. I just said it's easier.
Okay. But so what that it's easier to judge? Like if we're more similar than we are different and it's easier to judge based on differences, why is that even an important part of the equation? Why would we just not see our similarities? Like the beauty of a mosaic is that the different pieces are what makes it beautiful. And
Right.
they just find the smallest possible connection. Sometimes it's just corner to corner. Sometimes it's like this and they're fully connected, but sometimes it's just the smallest possible corner to corner makes the mosaic whole. And why, if it's in our art that we create all the time, we see those sort of connections happen that keep the integrity and the wholeness of the mosaic working. Why is it so hard for us to do as human beings?
Because we're basically geared towards figuring out where the differences lie.
And that's what now I'll ask you my question to you one more time. Because if we're geared towards figuring out where the differences are, and we all feel we're more similar than we are different, where does that? How does that? How does that go over? How do those two pieces go over each other.
Because you're not looking at the whole picture. You're looking at one very specific part, which is where the things lie and they connect, and that's great. You're trying to basically figure out where the things are the same. But if you look at an actual a painting, especially some of the old master paintings,
Uh-huh.
what you see is that you're trying to basically combine contrast as well as similarity into things. If you want to create a very strong painting, you can't just simply have a lot of similarities in there.
Okay,
You,
so let's stay with your image of the painting. In the painting, in those paintings where there's beautiful contrast, that contrast makes the painting even more beautiful. It doesn't make, no one would ever say that contrast shouldn't be there because that contrast makes the painting ugly. But we look at the differences we have and say that shouldn't be there because it makes it ugly. You're ugly.
have you ever looked at the Hieronymus Bosch triptychs?
No, I don't even know what those are. You're a
One,
smart guy.
you should. Yeah, it's called Way Too Much Art. Um, what you're basically looking at is that the best art isn't just simply filled with contrast. You don't have like blue here, yellow here, red here, and all that. You also have underlying themes, and you also have some really cool stuff that basically ties all of that together.
Okay.
The catch here is that you need not only this areas of similarity, that is, you need those underlying themes. You need basically, where the blue and the red actually do combine and create some really cool stuff. You need that contrast as well.
Okay.
You can't. It's sort of like, what do you prefer, stew or taco?
Taco.
Why?
I don't like stew.
Because stew is basically pretty much the same consistency, the same color. Everything tastes pretty much like everything else, right?
Yeah, I probably like a sandwich more than a soup, is what I'm thinking. So that's why I
But again,
decide.
with a sandwich or a taco, you basically have different areas of consistency. You still have things that have different flavors, that have very distinct flavors. And even if you put like a hot sauce in there or a heavy mustard, you're still going to taste in those individual tastes.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear you're not going to hear all that's in a stew because the stew's had so much time to basically come together and to percolate together and combine and all this that pretty much everything is going to taste pretty much the same. And after all, if you let it go for a little bit longer, everything's going to have the same texture. The key here is that not only do you need things to have some sort of similarity. I mean, if you go with a taco, for example, and all of a sudden you decide to put in, I don't know, pastrami, it's not going to work out so well.
Mm,
It's just too far outside the norm. But what you need to basically is figure out a way to combine those areas of contrast
I like
with
that.
those areas of similarity.
I like that. I like that a lot. Let's go on to the next place. Um, Trust. Is it easy for you to do or hard?
Surprisingly easy, but I think I tend to basically trust people until I've been proven wrong.
Uh-huh. Good. Do you follow along with people or are you a disruptor?
I'm definitely a disruptor. I definitely take pride in being a Scorpio.
A Scorpio. Okay.
More importantly, I also take pride in being a monkey. Go figure.
Okay. Would you say you're a leader or a follower?
Usually a leader, but I can follow, don't get me wrong, but I'm definitely one of the people that tends to basically be leader. I'm the guy who basically figures out how to solve things.
And
Uh,
so tell me about a leader who takes more than he receives.
that's
Takes
not
more
a
than
leader.
Okay, but what I'm trying to do is put together some of the pieces that you've given me in this mosaic of our conversation. When I asked you if you're a giver or a receiver, you said I probably take more than I give right now, and I'm probably more quiet. So now tell me how that quality goes now to leader or follower.
This is why I hate people who do black and white questions.
I love
Um,
that. I love that you do because I want you to put the color in it.
yeah, this is where I suck. I've always been more of a black and white photographer. Go figure. Just joking. Just joking.
That's okay. You're fine.
If you've seen some of the pictures I do on Facebook, I do great stuff with color. But the joke here is that occasionally you need to have a leader who is going to basically take a step back and actually just listen. You can't have somebody who's always going to be charging in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the King Arthurs are great, but occasionally you need the Merlins as well. You need somebody who's going to basically take a little bit of step back, listen to it, do the research, and actually try to figure out how to solve the problems, just as you got somebody else who's not afraid to charge into the situation.
Yeah.
And I'm more of the person who basically falls back and looks at and tries to figure out how to piece everything together and make a working puzzle out of it.
You did great. That's a great answer.
Thanks.
Um, I know both of these are really important, and I know you hate black and white questions. Um, but tell me what's more important for you right now. Is it more important for you right now to be able to stand on a platform, say what you want to say, and be heard by people? Or is it more important for you to create a platform where others can stand on it, say what they want to say, and you listen to them?
I'm definitely more into creating a platform.
Creating a platform.
In fact, yeah, this is where we're going to do the mandatory plug because it's important.
Go for it.
Basically, part of what I'm doing with my podcast is basically trying to basically point out to people that their story is important, but they've got to basically figure out how to basically phrase it a lot better. It's a writing podcast. It's all about basically making sure that people can actually communicate well. The entire point of the podcast was way back when I noticed there's a lot of places where illustrators should go to basically get, information on and judgment and basically, like DeviantArt, for example. You can go there, put out your artwork, and get people basically telling you what's good or what's bad about it. There's at the time there weren't a whole lot of places you can do the same with writing. So yeah, this is way back in the beginning of the internet. Go figure. Geez, I'm old. But part of what webcomic reviews and interviews is all about is basically pointing out to people that you've got a voice. It's just a matter of figuring out the right way to basically get that voice to be heard. We don't just simply do the writing thing. We also basically we make it a point that once you've developed that voice, once you've got your message down pat, that we also show you ways to basically get that point across to other people.
Love it.
So the entire
So,
point
go
is
ahead.
just having a little bit of fun with writing.
Fabulous. So, with that said, if you had the opportunity right now to speak to a world that is listening, what would you want to say to them?
I'd say it's time to take a chill pill.
Okay.
You've got way too many people that are just charging into the situations and not really caring about the ramifications. We need to start looking at the ramifications of our actions and basically allow for those possible ramifications.
Yeah. And if you could give one tip as to what a chill pill looks like and how to experience it and how to actually do that, what would you say to people?
The easy solution for me is just grab a couple of beers with somebody. Just find something to relax, and find a movie. Find something that's just fun and just enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to thank you so much for being here with us.
No problem.
Because one of the things that I love when I have a conversation with somebody who doesn't think like me, but thinks exactly like me. And the way you say things may be different than the way I say things, but that's exactly the reason why I started 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers. To just take a chill pill.
Cool.
To just hold the space in this room for other people to be able to say what they said. And if you and I were to meet on the street, we may disagree on some things. But in this room where you have the freedom to speak what you want to speak, and I just have the ability to listen to you and draw you out and understand what you're trying to say more than what I would if I just let it go, I find that we think almost exactly the same. Our delivery system's different. The way we present it is different. But I believe it almost exactly what you believe. That if people would just chill out and just have a beer together or just relax or just come into this room and just ease out for a minute, take a few breaths, take an inhalation and an exhalation, speak and then listen, the world would become a different place. When people are strangers, the world's a strange place. But if you spend 45 minutes, what did we spend? 45 minutes together? Not even.
About that.
Yeah. We spent 45 minutes together. And in 45 minutes, you're like my brother now, right? And in that 45 minutes where you're my brother, now I live in a friendly world with you. I could come back to you and we could have another conversation, and we come not as strangers, we come as friends. And when you live in a friendly world, the world suddenly becomes friendlier.
Right?
And I think if we would just step back a little bit, and I'm going to challenge everybody listening to this today, find someone you don't know, either online or in person. Just walk up to them and ask them, how you doing? And just have a conversation with them, not where you speak less than they speak. Listen more than you normally speak. Just ask them things and get to know them. And I wonder if you won't find what I find every day in this room, sometimes many times a day, that we walk in as strangers and we leave as friends. If you want to go even one step further, do what Jameis suggests. What a great idea. Go sit down and have a beer together, or have a vodka together, or have a scotch or something. Sit down and just chillax with each other and just take it easy. And put all the things that you think and disagree with to the side. Like in my book, The Mosaic, when Mo, the main character, said, I'm going to take everything I see and I'm going to slide it to the right. And I'm going to see what's there when I don't see what I see what's actually there. Do the same thing in the conversations you have. Take everything you believe and slide them to the right. And just listen to what someone else believes and see if, even though their style's different, even though the way they present, even though their cadence is different, if you don't find that you're sitting here like with my brother Jameis right now and saying, you little son of a gun, we believe almost entirely the same thing. Just a very different way of presenting it. I want to thank you, Jameis, for coming. I want to thank those of you who come all the time and listen to these shows for coming. If you like this show, share it with people you like. The way things spread in this world is when we like something, we tell people we like about what we like. If that's the same thing I'm asking you to do here. If you like this show or you like these conversations, share them with people you like. Jameis, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they go ahead and do that?
Ironically, usually on Facebook. It's just that's usually where I spend a lot of the time.
Okay.
Um,
You'll send me your Facebook links and all your other links and a headshot. Will you do that as soon as we get off so I can post this soon?
Will do.
Perfect.
In fact, I've got to take another face shot here sometime today. So
Okay, good. Good. You don't want to mess with that face too much. You want to get that face out to the world a little bit. I like it. Is there anything you want to say just in closing before we leave?
just basically learn to appreciate each other a little bit more.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Again, Jameis, thank you for being here. Those of you who listen, thank you so much for being on the show, for listening to the show. Until the next stranger comes into the room, use that time to become friends with strangers. Jim Morrison used to say years ago when I was growing up, people are strange when you're a stranger. Faces seem ugly when you're alone. But people aren't strange when you're not a stranger. Become friends with people. Take it on yourself to sit down and have a conversation with someone you don't know. And even more than that, have a conversation with someone you do know too. Why not? And sit with them and find out if there isn't a lot more about them that you don't know anything about. Until that next stranger walks into the room, don't be strangers, be friends. Take care. Ciao.